Page A14. Death comes without warning. It may come today, parting me from all that is familiar and all those I love. Now is the time to think of what heart connections mean. Now is the time to think of what goes beyond birth and death. Now is the time to discover and learn to trust the openness, clarity, and sensitivity of my being, the indestructible heart essence of all beings. I have today to prepare. Worldly attachments are useless, as are anger and delusion. Now is the time to let them go and rest relaxed in my own true nature. What use am I to others if I'm no use to myself? How can I liberate them if I cannot liberate myself? May I and all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May I and all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I and all beings have the happiness of complete awakening that will never diminish or fail. Thus may we abide in great equanimity, unruffled by attachment and aversion, and with equal love for all beings. So it's nearly 12 years ago since my mother died, and I was reminded of her death when preparing for this talk on love and compassion. She was a student of Lama Shempen as well. She and I went through the Discovering the Heart of Buddhism course together. It was only a few months before she died that she took refuge. And throughout her life, she'd never been a particularly confident person. She'd always been quite anxious, like me. And never felt that she was particularly much of a practitioner. She'd come to meditation quite late in her life. She always worried if she was getting it right. But when it came to the point where she was entering the dying process, she said to me when I got to the hospice quickly, she said, "Is it coming? Is it coming?" I said, "What?" And she said, "My death. Is my death coming?" I said, "Yes, Mum, your death's coming now." And she said, "Great." And it was as if all that tension, all that anxiety, all that worry, all that whatever we're holding dropped away. And for those last 2 days during the dying process, she radiated. She was joyful, easeful, playful, light, connecting. Everyone who came into her, the nursing staff, the family, she would have a word for each of them, even though she was, really poorly. Her face lit up. There was a time when it was just me and her overnight. I said, "It's just you and me tonight, Mum." She said, "Whoopee!" Yeah, she was really like, okay, she had medication to help her, but I don't think that was all of it. It really felt like, well, it showed me. I felt very grateful for the lesson she'd given me about how to die, but also really she was showing me how to live. And I suppose the only sadness I feel is that for her and for so many of us, we go through most of our life holding so much. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could live more of our lives having let that go? And I suppose I'm telling this story because when we're talking about love and compassion, it's really there. It's just there. And it just radiated out of my mother when she dropped what was in the way of it. It was her true nature. It was just obscured by clinging and anxiety and trying to hold on, trying to fix things, sort things out. So yeah, that's what we truly are inside. And so when we talk about love and compassion, it's not with the attitude that it's something we have to get from somewhere else, that we have to somehow find elsewhere. It's just a matter of getting out of the way in order for it to manifest more, to flourish more, to radiate more. So Pema did a lovely introduction last month on Living the Awakened Heart. This is an old edition. It looks much more posh now. And she went through all the 6 areas of Living the Awakened Heart, which is the kind of broad, overarching curriculum, really, of everything that Lama Shenpen teaches. And she's divided it into 6 areas, and with love and compassion as one of the areas. But of course, love and, in a sense, they're all, each of them, if you see what I mean, they all are the whole thing. And you can find each of the areas in each one of them. So it's not as if we're taking love and compassion out as a kind of optional extra that you might do a bit of if you want to. What we're saying is, as Pema mentioned last time, all these practices and teachings will point to a central essence, if you like, the awakened heart. And they're all facets of it, and you can't separate them all out. So within love and compassion, you will find all the other elements of living the awakened heart. You'll find how to act in the world. You'll find how to make very strong aspirations, intentions. You'll find the importance of connecting to the mandala of awakening. You'll find insight really important. So it's the whole of everything, really, love and compassion. And as Lama Shenpen said to me recently, if you could really practice love and compassion, if you could really get that right, you wouldn't need any other practice. And then she said, it's a big if, though. So that's where the whole picture is really important. So we practice, and we might notice that, like, for example, I'm very drawn to practices on love and compassion, and yet sometimes I can feel a bit overwhelmed, or I get a bit of compassion fatigue, or, I'm trying too hard. And that's when perhaps I need to explore a little bit more teachings on the true nature of a being, what it means, what is a being, the whole teachings around emptiness, vast division. So she also, Lama Shenpen also wanted me to stress that this whole teaching on living the awakened heart is not separate from discovering the heart of Buddhism or trusting the heart of Buddhism. In fact, again, discovering the heart of Buddhism, trusting the heart of Buddhism contain everything, and all the other practices are just spiraling around book 1 of Discovering the Heart of Buddhism, the indestructible heart essence. So it's all in there. Discovering the heart of Buddhism is really all about love and compassion. It's not something else. So it's just an important point that we're not abstracting this subject and doing it a separate thing. It's all about the whole. And formless meditation, what we spend much of our time doing, formless practice, sitting in meditation, is again not separate from love and compassion. It may be that as we sit there, we don't feel quite so connected to love and compassion. It may be that there are certain habits that we have, or obscurations that we have, certain ways that we practice that might not be allowing that love and compassion to flow very freely. So that's where these practices, specific practices of love and compassion, can help us. But if we could just practice formless meditation completely and easily, then love and compassion would naturally arise. However, for many of us, it's useful to find other practices, to go to the specific practices of love and compassion, just to help us. So there are specific practices on love and compassion. We have the Metta Sutta, which some of you might be familiar with, which was a teaching given by the Buddha to his monks who'd gone off to a wilderness, really, the forest, to meditate, and were very pleased with themselves. And the tree spirits who lived there got out of the way to make way for these noble monks. And then when the monks settled in and were going to stay there for a while, the tree spirits got a little bit annoyed, and so started to make life difficult for the monks, started to frighten them a bit or play up with them. And so the monks got scared and came back to the Buddha and said, we can't practice there, it's too scary. And that's when the Buddha taught them the Metta Sutta. He taught them how to connect to love for all beings, how to imagine that every single being was like your only child. That same quality of love that you might have for your child, that you could extend out to all beings. And interestingly, he taught them it as a protection. It was a protection against fear. So loving kindness is like an antidote to fear in that regard. So the monks learnt the Metta Sutta, learnt how to practice it, went back to the forest, and the tree spirits were so kind of wowed by this quality of love that they had, that they came and served them and made life comfortable for them and looked after them. So many times when I've experienced fear, I just tend to have fear of the dark, generally, just simple fears that one might have. I've found linking into that quality of love and extending that from myself outwards into the space around me, I found that actually a really helpful practice to support me if I'm feeling afraid, just like the Buddha told his monks. I'm just giving a brief overview of the practices, then I'll talk a bit more generally about love and compassion. So the other practice that we have is called the Apramanas. Apramana meaning immeasurable, limitless. The immeasurable qualities of love and compassion. Limitless love, limitless compassion, limitless joy, limitless equanimity. Love, joy, compassion, equanimity, equal for all beings everywhere. I'm holding up this book because Lama Shenpen has written some advice, some guidance for how to practice the Apramanas. The Apramanas is, the prayer of the Apramanas is what we sang just as I started to talk. It's may I and all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May I and all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I and all beings have the happiness of complete awakening that will never diminish or fail. Thus may we abide in great equanimity, unruffled by attachment and aversion, with equal love for all beings. So you might be interested to take a little look at this booklet. There's some outside in the hall. I'll talk a bit more about the Apramanas. There's another whole system of teaching on love and compassion called Lojong, which literally means mind training. It's been developed by many different commentators. You can buy different books on it. And it's really a whole series of, what are called slogans, which is a funny term for them really, sentences, pithy statements, and they relate to your meditation and what's called post-meditation, which is everything else, all the rest of your life, outside of your sitting practice. And they are helpful reminders to orientate ourselves towards altruism, compassion, thinking of others. One of them, contained within the Lojong teachings, is something called Tonglen. Tonglen means sending and taking, literally. And it's the whole idea of that shift of perspective from trying to get rid of everything we don't want to actually letting it in and giving out everything that we do want. So it's kind of the opposite to a common sense view of what a normal person might do, which is, I want this, I'll have it, and I don't want that, I'll get rid of it. It's helping us to bring that attitude into all of our life, really. One of the Lojong slogans is 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. Doesn't mean a lot when you say it like that, but I've been finding it really helpful recently. So, for example, what it means is when we get triggered by a situation, something going on around us, we notice some emotion in us. So, for example, right now, sitting here, I'm triggered by being in this chair with all these people looking at me and with the intention of giving a Dharma talk. So I'm feeling anxiety. And so that's the I suppose they call it the poison. It's what happens in you when you're triggered by something. And then what's suggested in that slogan is you turn it right around. So instead of just sitting there anxious, you make the aspiration that may this anxiety be taking away all the anxiety of every other being. How many beings right now must be feeling anxious? So many beings must be feeling anxious right now. How unpleasant it is to feel anxious. And I wish that by meeting this in myself, I could be taking it away from others. I wish that they didn't have to feel this. And you turn it around, so you offer out to oneself and all beings freedom from anxiety, ease, relaxation, confidence. May all beings be free from anxiety. So every time we feel something that's unpleasant, difficult, challenging, could be anger, anxiety, fear, sadness, it can be really helpful just to acknowledge I'm not alone. So many beings must be feeling this right now. And what would it be like to make that aspiration to take on board all the negativity of all beings and to wish them well, And I actually find that shift something in me. It links me into a sense of empowerment rather than being the victim of my anxiety. It's more like, there is something I can do with this. It has a meaning. It has a purpose, perhaps. I can use it for something beneficial. That's the way with all the Lojong slogans. You can use them to help you change your relationship with your world into something that's of benefit, orientated towards the Dharma. So, I want to tell you another story when we come on to love. We had a retreat recently, and we had a lovely Dutch guy on the retreat called Leon, and he told this great story that he remembered from many years ago when he used to cycle. He was on a motorbike in Holland and going off onto the back roads where no one else went. And he came across quite an isolated house. And on the side of the house was painted in big letters, "The coffee is ready." And so he stopped his motorbike, pulled up and went in. And there he found an elderly, lame Dutch woman who was just sitting there, making her space available for anyone who passed by. And there was always coffee ready. There was also beer, if you didn't fancy the coffee. And her name was, in English, Old Betsy. And she'd been cared for by her parents, but when they died, she'd been left in quite an isolated situation. And so she'd turned that whole thing around by just having an open door. And what Leon said was he noticed that the walls were completely covered with pictures, and the pictures were of people. And she spent her time with magazines and newspapers cutting out pictures of people and sticking them on the walls. And he needed to, I think, go to the bathroom at one time. She showed him upstairs, and he realized that every inch of space in her wall, ceiling, everywhere was covered in pictures of people. And so he asked her, what was all this about? What was going on? And she said, I just love people. It gives me such joy to be connected to all these people. I can't get out. I can't go very far. I like people to come here. I like to make the space available. And I like to have people all around me. Very, very touching story. And when she finally passed away, he said one day he went past and the whole side of the house was full of flowers. People had come to commemorate her when she passed away. She was so much loved. So that quality of love, delighting in others, enjoying others, welcoming others into your space. Similar qualities to what my mother was exhibiting, that playfulness, ease. I don't know whether anyone else has any associations with the word love or any qualities that might come up for you when you think about love. Could be anything.
Funnily enough, spaciousness.
Spaciousness.
I'm not quite sure why that was, but it seems to, when I'm feeling more spacious or if I'm aware of spaciousness, then automatically warmth, love seems to come from that.
You just said warmth. That's a good one.
Warmth. Yeah.
Smell, actually.
Smell. That's interesting. What's that about me?
Well, I just think with people that you're very close to, members, your partner, that's almost like the sort of drinking them in,
Yeah, getting close, that intimacy.
That smell is so untangible, isn't it?
Even the smell of your dog's ears.
I know.
I think there is a quality of tenderness.
Tenderness.
Quite slightly painful, if you know what I mean, but not painful, misery painful, but really joyful and at the same time a bit emotional, when you kind of get a bit bubbly. So I think the word tenderness feels quite...
Yeah. Right on that edge sometimes, isn't it? Almost excruciating tenderness. Yeah. Interestingly, you've mentioned a few of the areas that Lama Shenpen talks about in here, that love can manifest in many different ways. It's not just necessarily the warmth and the tenderness, but it can be any of what we call the Buddha family qualities. So it could be the kind of Padma, passion, warmth, tenderness. It could be the Buddha quality of spaciousness that Yunten mentioned. It could be a very calmer energy, a very active energy. So, for example, when I was first here and I was really ill and I was just in the upstairs bedroom, unable to really, I was pretty well bedbound for months. And Jonathan's way of showing me his love was to wire me up to the shrine room, which was upstairs next door, so that I could lie in bed listening to teachings or joining in puja. So that, that was his way of expressing love, was through action, through doing something, karma. And then we have the ratna, the richness, the giving, the generosity, the overflowing. And what's the other one? Vajra, cutting through. Yeah. So love isn't necessarily all warm and cuddly. It could be quite a bit like Guru Rinpoche, quite let go of what you need to let go of in order to be happy. So Lama Shenpen has said, and I keep hearing this in my mind, that the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to realize our true nature. And sometimes that can take a bit of a Vajra energy to cut through so that we can drop what needs to be dropped for our true nature to shine forth. So the Vajra energy, the the strong, cutting. So we can spend time just cultivating these qualities, exploring them, feeling them. Lama Shempen, in this book, she talks about linking into the wish, really wishing that all beings are happy and have the causes of happiness. And she also describes in other writings that she's done a more immediate way of linking into it, which is simply to practice as if, to pretend, to imagine, to plunge straight in. What would it feel like to feel happy? What would it feel like for the heart to be lifted? What would it feel like if other beings were also uplifted, happy? How might that be, this kind of playing with delighting in others, playing with imagination, and just exploring that so that we can access that quality of uplifted heart. I'm curious what might come to your mind when you think of the causes of happiness, because it's quite important, I think, that the wish in this practice is not only to wish people happiness, but to wish them the causes of happiness. Do you want to say anything about what you think the causes of happiness might be?
Gratitude.
Gratitude, yeah?
I would say that there aren't any causes. All you have to do to be happy is stop creating unhappiness. Then you will be happy.
That's an interesting perspective, yeah. I suppose that is a cause in a way. But yeah, I like that way of looking at it. Stop creating unhappiness. Mm-hmm. Gratitude, generosity. Stop getting in the way of our own happiness. From what came to me when I was reflecting on it was just slowing down, really. Just, basic mindfulness, rather than always being in a rush, which I suppose is creating unhappiness.
Accepting what is.
Acceptance, yeah, that's a strong word, isn't it? Yeah.
Because one person can be unhappy in exactly the same situation that makes someone else very happy.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think experiencing a real sense of freedom, like a kind of childish sense of freedom, where you allow yourself to be without responsibilities and just carefree, just lying under a tree,
Yeah,
that real freedom.
yeah. Space, freedom to play, in a way, yeah. Childish. Yeah.
Meaning.
Meaning. Yeah.
Sorry, was that
Meaning. So, reminds me of what Jenny was pointing to with acceptance, that some people in a certain situation can be really unhappy with it, and some people in the same situation can turn it around so that it's not a cause of unhappiness, and maybe that's something to do with meaning.
Yeah, I was also thinking that when you spend your time doing something that you find meaningful, even if it's not easy or happy, somehow there's a sense of fulfillment there. So fulfillment, maybe rather than, I don't know, maybe fulfillment is easier than happiness in some way. It allows for.
Yeah.
There are some people who have a very pronounced lack of contentment with everything in their and I think a lot of people have a certain amount of that, but some people have it to a very great degree. Someone that I have in mind, they're never satisfied with where they've moved to or the house they've moved to, And it also, linking it with compassion and love, makes it more difficult for them to extend compassion because they're always thinking about the discontent of what they've got.
Yeah, yeah. So that brings us to compassion, actually. What you've just been saying, yes, is how, it's suggested to us that we wish everybody happy, we imagine them all happy, we invite them into this great playful, wonderful world of everyone being happy. But actually, the reality is that many people are not happy, many people are suffering, no matter what situation they're in, no matter what, So compassion as steadfast love, perhaps. Compassion as steadiness, compassion as being with over time, being alongside people over time with all the ups and downs. Given that I was ill for 10 years, I certainly knew which of my friends had that steadfast love, because it's not easy. It's not easy to continue to wish someone well when they're continually being ill. It takes patience. It takes a certain quality of I'm with you, whatever's going on. You don't have to be all nice and happy. You can be miserable, and I'm just alongside you. Compassion. I don't know how you feel, but in the traditional teachings, it's said that we develop this love and compassion for ourselves first, and then we start to radiate it out to those we're familiar with, friendly with, to people we don't really have much to do with, they're kind of neutral, to people, and then to people we don't like, and then outwards and outwards. But I don't know about you, but I actually find it quite challenging to give love and compassion to myself.
Actually, I disagree with that. Because if you open your heart in a compassionate and loving way to other people, you automatically have a sense of love in your heart for yourself as well.
Yes, I was just coming to that, Jenny.
Sorry.
It's all right. But that you've said exactly what I was going to say, that I'm only offering this just because it's my experience. It might not be anyone else's experience, but yes, I just more immediately link into a sense of connection or wishing others well. And then when that's got a little bit of a flicker of love going, I can then include myself in, no problem. And it's there. Yeah. So it's a kind of kickstart. Exactly what you're saying. Yeah. It's there.
Yes, I don't think you even have to think about yourself.
No.
That's why I rather object to that. Love yourself. Well, people do hate themselves, or at least they say they do, in our society. But just loving, just opening up your heart, you're feeling, there's just oneness between you and what you're loving. There's no need to say love yourself, because you are part of what you're loving.
Yeah.
I think there can be particular blockages around those thinking about yourself that,
Yeah.
that are, possibly worth exploring when the time is right, when you get a sense of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think many of us have certain judgmental voices that can go unnoticed. So it can be a really helpful practice just to notice or to get more aware of how we're talking to ourselves in our head. So in a sense, that could be a practice of being kind to oneself, is not judging our judging, noticing the judging, not judging it. Oh, hello, judging mind. Welcome. Other simple practices that I do to link into a kind of, to loosen up, as Shraddhan said, loosen up what's getting in the way of our kindness, is simple things like I sometimes notice that the way I relate to objects in my world is quite harsh. I might just sort of grab a glass or pick up my phone or grab the kettle or whatever. And so I've developed a little practice of what I call gentle touch. So as I might pick up my phone a bit more gently, or I might aim to hold the glass a little bit more gently, and then I imagine doing the same for myself. So it's kind of like a back doorway in. Or being in nature and just getting a sense of how, like on days where the breeze is really gentle and you're being touched by the gentle breeze, again, that sense of letting that gentleness in. Just little tips like that that might help us to handle ourselves with care. But I completely get what Jenny's saying about, we don't need to get ourselves all twisted up with I've got to somehow do this thing of loving myself. It's more like letting go of what's in the way again. So what gets in the way of our love and compassion? What distorts it? What distorts this longing, this wishing for others, for ourselves and others to be happy and be free of suffering? Lama Shempen describes that our wish for happiness can get distorted into desire. We want something. We want to get it from outside. Somehow our happiness is in outer objects, whatever outer means. Somewhere out there, we're grasping for something beyond us, and we want to have it. And our compassion can get distorted into anger. It can be a little bit akin to anger, in that it's like, I just want to get rid of all this suffering. Oh my goodness. So we have these two dynamics going on. I really want this and I really don't want that. Distortion of our heart wish into two, pull and a push. I've gone blank.
I wondered, well, I remember being a very compassionate and loving, very small child when I was tiny. And as I grew up, I became less sensitive. And I wondered how much, well, not to blame society, but just to say that how much the conditioning of society goes towards making one less, or inclining one to be less sensitive about how other people feel or whatever it is. But, there came a point when I realised I had to get back to being a small child again, to open up my heart again.
It's interesting what you say, Jenny. I'll come on to that in a minute, but actually maybe it's relevant right now. Is I don't know if this is exactly what you were saying, but what I was going to say was how as we go through our life, when we get a bit knocked about by events, by situations, or by our own inner chatter, we can close ourselves down. And maybe society encourages us to do that. But when things are difficult and it's not easy to experience them, it's not easy to meet our experience, we can try and get rid of it. We can try and push it away. We can try and put a lid on it. We can try and hide it. We can try and just block it out somehow, block out our experience. So we tend to start cutting off. And Pema Chodron describes this really beautifully in one of her books about how we tend to start to armour ourselves against our experience. So we put on dark glasses, we put on earphones, nose pegs. When I was thinking about that, I was thinking, actually, these days, all you'd need to say is we just have our phone. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's what's called our weapon of mass distraction. So yeah, we start to, it's just too much, we don't want to feel it. But unfortunately, that has the effect of not only cutting us off from what's difficult, it has the effect of cutting off from all experience, which is the joy and the sorrow. So we start to be limited. And I'm not knocking that in the sense that I've done a lot of that and it has helped me in my life. It's a strategy for dealing and coping and getting through. And I'm not suggesting that we start taking off our nose pegs and earmuffs and sunglasses immediately and just jumping into experience. But maybe there's a path there, and a very gentle, kindly path when we're resourced enough to start opening. Oh, I was just going to tell you the poem of William Blake, which is, when we were doing this about trying to grab our experience and have it. William Blake says, he who binds to himself a joy does its winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. Something about that simple being with the joys rather than trying to have them. We tend to crush them. But if we could let them pass through our fingers like water, and being really there with them, like watching a sunset. I remember once my mother, who was an artist, wanted me to learn to paint, and so my first attempt at this was to try and paint a sunset. And of course it was always changing. I was just going, it's changed, it's changed, it's changed. So that wasn't the best thing to start with. So we get into pain, the pain of trying to block out our experience, the pain of resist. That is painful, although it could be a useful strategy temporarily. The other thing that's painful, that I've also done a lot of, is the pain of trying to put a lid on our heart wish, because we don't want the pain of wishing for things to be better. It's too uncomfortable. We don't want to have that disappointment when things aren't better. So, but that's a real poverty, isn't it? Because we're then squashing our aliveness, really. We're squashing what's fundamental to life, which is that longing for well-being. We're saying, I can't bear to feel it. It's too uncomfortable to have that longing. Lama Shenpen says that when we need to link to compassion, we really need to feel that. We really need to feel that strong, no, this isn't right. This isn't, I don't want this suffering. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for anyone. We need to link into the power. And I sometimes feel that a kind of depression that I've certainly experienced myself is a sort of, when that gets, you lose the oomph of that no. It's just like, so there's some way we need to really feel that longing, but it's really hard then to feel that longing without grasping, without wanting some goal, without grasping for things to get better, but just to rest in that longing.
Is that a kind of compassion, that feeling?
Yeah. Unbearable compassion. So that we might be familiar with that term, unbearable compassion, from a prayer that's called the Mahamudra Pranidhana. All beings are by nature Buddha, but not realizing this, they flounder endlessly in samsara. May unbearable compassion for beings endlessly suffering like this arise in me. And then he goes on to talk about the vibrant power of unbearable compassion. That power. We're talking about a power. We're talking about our power. We're talking about bodhicitta, the awakened heart, the power of the awakened heart. So unbearable. So what I was reflecting on, unbearable. Unbearable. In my mind, it meant something had to give. Something's got to give in order for that to be possible, to stay with that level of longing, I guess, that level of and I guess what needs to give is our small sense of ourself. Yeah. So the prayer goes on to say, without suppressing the vibrant power of unbearable compassion, simultaneously within that tender love, the empty essence dawns nakedly. So and may I practice both of those, both at once. Understanding the true nature of reality as being empty, in the sense that we're not solid and real, you out there, me in here, the world, solidly as it appears. It's much more mysterious than that. We are actually all connected in our heart, like in the prayer at the very beginning. Death comes without warning, might come today. May I realize the true nature of my heart connections, how I'm connected to all beings. How could it be possible that I could love all beings? It could only be possible if we're all connected, some very mysterious, deep way. this vibrant power of unbearable compassion. So something needs to break apart in order for that to come through. You know, I can't sit here and pretend to give a talk on love and compassion, just little me. Somehow one has to trust something coming through. If we set out to be bodhisattvas, to bring love and compassion to all beings as little me, we probably wouldn't get very far. But I had a friend who was looking after his partner who was dying, and when I rang him up one day, he said to me, you know, my heart is breaking many times a day. And then he said, but I know that's what hearts are for. Some sense that we're trying to hold it all together, we're trying to cope, and yet maybe the Buddha wasn't talking about coping. Maybe the Buddha was talking about something else, a power that's within us that just, as everyone's been saying, we just need to get out of the way for that to come through.
I guess you have to be able to endure it as well.
Oh yeah.
It's not as if like you could just, if you could wave a magic wand and take all those things in the way out of the way, it's not like we would necessarily be able to, we wouldn't be able to bear it, would we? Do you know? So I suppose part of it is kind of tolerating the intensity of whatever. Otherwise, it's natural to want to kind of, you know, very hard to take away obscurations if you don't have the capacity to experience kind of intensity of things as they are. So it kind of
Yeah. I think this is where the other area of living the awakened heart comes in, the connection with the mandala of awakening, that reliance on adhisthana, that refuge, that trusting, that sometimes I think experience happens to us, suddenly all our masks might get taken away quite fast, and then it can be strong and destabilizing, and that's where Sangha, teacher, mandala comes in, and our refuge. But yes, the same friend who talked to me about the heartbreaking, he said to me, when I asked him about acceptance or tolerating intense experience, he said, well, you can't do acceptance by willpower. So I would say, you know, we can't push ourselves to, you know, come on, unbearable compassion, bring it on. I'm in the, you know, I've got a gold belt. I can take it. It's we don't want to necessarily push and try and get that experience, but at the same time we can somehow be open to the conditions coming together that enable that possibly to happen. Does that make sense, Mia?
So I was just wondering, as you were saying that, like when we practice particularly love and kindness, that we particularly, and I don't know if I was practicing wrongly, but particularly make an effort to bring, to create something. I wonder if that is a bit that, you know, I use a bit of that effort. You know, come on, let's do it. I'm going to wish well-being for, I don't know, for my friend, for myself. Or, do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah.
A bit of an element
Well,
of...
I think, to be honest, there will be, you know, our ego ambition will be in there right till the end, you know, right till we're enlightened. And I haven't really, you know, this is such a short talk to go into the actual practices, but certainly the instruction is to whip it up a bit, so that we do need to put some self-effort in, some effort into cultivating something, but at the same time with the understanding that it's not really something that we're cultivating, we're more just bringing into relief what's in the way of our natural love to shine forth. But at the same time, it can be helpful to put in some effort. Yeah, it's this whole balance of effort and effortlessness all the way through, isn't it? So the compassion and that unbearableness and that longing for all beings to be free from compassion, and working with our own difficulties. Again, something that I found helpful is to see if it's possible, for example, if I'm feeling very anxious or if I've got a migraine or something like that, to stay with the unpleasantness of the experience, to see if I can meet it as much as I can, very gently, tenderly. And at the same time, see if I can hold in my experience at the same time that longing to be free of suffering, that power of my heart wish, that yearning, not only for myself, but for all beings to not suffer. Seeing if it's possible, so that I'm not trying to get rid of this pain, but I am meeting it as best I can, and at the same time meeting that heart wish, so not suppressing the heart wish either, but holding them both. And Tonglen is really another way of doing that, except it involves movement. I feel Tonglen is a bit like WD-40 in my world. It's like a little bit of lubrication on my switch that's got a bit stuck or rusty. So in Tonglen, the idea is that you, on one cycle of the breath, or you breathe in the difficulty. Say for my case, maybe I'm breathing in the anxiety, and then you make that switch to breathing out that power of ease, well-being, whatever it would take for others to feel well, for yourself and others to feel well. And then you switch again, breathing in, taking in what's difficult, switch into the power of the awakened heart. So almost like the more difficulty you're experiencing, it's like fuel for the fire of the heart, really. But of course, whenever you're tending a fire, you need to be careful not to just, put loads and loads of fuel on it all at once, because you'll just put it out. So if there's just a little flame there, we need to be really careful and maybe focus more on the giving out and connecting to our goodness, our heart, that longing, and doing more of the giving out. So Lama Shenpen has been a bit wary sometimes of introducing Tonglen, in case, given our kind of Western culture, we do more of the bring it on, taking in all the difficulty, and not quite enough of confidence in what we can give out. Oh yeah, I was going to mention another little tip that I've particularly found helpful is what I call giving up without giving up. So at one point we were here, weren't we, trying to grab what we like, trying to get rid of what we don't like. And what I tend to do is I sometimes manage to just let go. Whew. But then I go straight into, quite often, despair. I've given up completely. But that's another position that I'm holding. It's another quite strong position that I'm holding. And within that strong position of despair, there's an awful lot of wishing, but it's just very suppressed. It's got a strong lid on it because I don't like to feel it. So what I call giving up without giving up is giving up the struggle, so you let go, and then you find another place to land somehow, which has buoyancy. And maybe you could call it without giving up the faith, but maybe there are other words that work for you. Maybe it's acceptance. I have a sort of sense of it being more of a kind of embrace, meeting our experience, aligning with, not trying to sidle off or find another position, but really being there. Giving up without giving up.
I've never heard that before. You could copyright it. That's quite an interesting. I can imagine that a lot of people could relate to that. The idea, because it's sort of like just the danger of just going into, oh well, it's just how it is, almost like passive resignation of, so that sort of that giving up of the battle, stepping out of the battle into passive resignation. It seems very familiar. I'm sure it might be familiar to a lot of people, and I've never heard it described like that. So I'm quite interested in moving into buoyancy. And,
Well, that's just my
well, I know, but it's fascinating because there's something sort of keeping you upward. You know, you're buoyant, your head's above water, you're not sinking with it. It's quite it feels like a really interesting analogy to almost otherwise there's self-destruct, isn't there? Oh, you know. And but that really doesn't sound like self-destruct. It sounds like letting go, but just keeping your head above water. Sometimes that's all you can do, isn't it?
I think I'd describe it as groundlessness, actually, as well. So it's a bit like, because I've explored resignation and acceptance quite a lot, but resignation for me is trying to find ground. It's like this, it's always going to be like this, it always has been like this, it's awful, and I'm kind of accepting it, you know. And you've landed, you've arrived, that's it. Nothing more to say about it, really. Whereas acceptance is much more, you're kind of in the river, you haven't found anywhere to land yet, you're just in the flow. And Lama really helped me with this when I was wondering about acceptance. She said, well, it's not about accepting something, it's just being with your experience, which of course is always changing, isn't it? So just because we're here now and it's like this now doesn't mean it's going to stay the same in the next minute. You're always you're just right there. It's very awake. I think it's probably pretty enlightened to be able to do that, you know. I think acceptance and enlightenment must go together pretty much.
I call that actually active acceptance. To me, it really works for me.
Active acceptance rather than passive. Yeah.
A bit like giving up without giving up.
Yeah. Different.
I like that one too.
So there's loads more to say. I'm aware of the time. I haven't even touched on the difficulties, the challenges of practicing the apramanas when we start to extend it to others more, and, you know, people who we have difficulties with. That's probably another talk. I haven't gone into the other ones, joy and equanimity. But I did just want to kind of end a bit with equanimity, I guess, as in some ways you could call it the fruit of the practice, where you have equal, limitless love, compassion, joyfulness, rejoicing in all beings. And I said to Lama recently, well, it says that, but you know, it can't really mean that we would have the same intensity of love that we have, say, for our child or our family member as we would have for a worm. You know, it just can't possibly mean that. She said, oh no, it does, actually. It does. It's really challenging. She said, we love beings because they're beings, and all beings are equal. They're all beings. They all have Buddha nature. All sentient beings have Buddha nature. So it's not that we, that's why we're loving beings, because they have that same Buddha nature as we do. But, she said, we need to learn to care and prioritize our energy and activity to support the center of our mandala and those that are connected more closely with us. It makes sense that we would give more of our attention, care, spend more time with, support people beings we're more committed to, closer to in our mandala. And the worm, we may not be able to benefit so much in this lifetime, but we'd still love them. We wouldn't, it wouldn't be a different kind of love. But we prioritize our action towards those we're more able to benefit and we have more commitments with. And how would it be then to imagine that we are loved? That there are beings, there are awakened beings who've trodden this path before us, who've woken up, who are enlightened, who are here to help us, the mandala of awakening, who loves all beings equally. How would it be to act as if that was true? It might be a leap, it might be like a big leap of faith, but maybe we can just play with what it would feel like if that really was true. Do we want to be loved equally? I realised that I didn't. I'd rather like to be special. But but I think that's because, many of us have grown up with love that's conditioned, partial, and we have to prove ourselves, we have to do something, we have to be someone special in order to be loved. Whereas for the Buddhas, they really do have that same quality of love for all beings, complete love for all beings. And what might it be like to rest in that?
I just thought of that old song, is it 1920s song? Keep young and beautiful if you want to be loved.
Well, I think we'd better give up.
What a strange song to write. It was very popular.
Yeah, it's a strong belief, isn't it, that we have to somehow do something, prove something, look like something in order to be loved. But actually, what would it be like if we could just play with that possibility that actually there is love? The universe is love, totality is love, reality is love, and we're not separate from that love. And I was wondering, how to link into that when we're not feeling so good. When we're feeling a million light years away from that love. And I checked this with Lama, and it's true that if we can link into that power of love and compassion in our own hearts, that is no different. That is the same. That is the mandala of awakening coming through us. That is the love of all the Buddhas coming through our own heart. So if we're feeling a bit down or challenged in some way, and we can manage to remember just to feed that flame a little bit with a little bit of the fuel of meeting just as much as we can the difficulty in our experience, and let that fuel the fire of our heart, that could be, we could feel that as the love of all the Buddhas coming through us. And in fact, whenever in the Tibetan society, whenever somebody does something for someone or does something kind or whatever, their response is tucheche, and that literally means compassion. So they are seeing the compassion of all the Buddhas, and it's tucheche, which is the honorific form of compassion, meaning the compassion of the Buddhas. So they are noticing and valuing and recognizing, acknowledging, aligning, honoring and celebrating even the love and compassion of all the Buddhas in their world at this time, acting in the world to wake everyone up, to benefit them. It's a wonderful way to be. Maybe we could link into that. So I'll just end with going back to my mum, because she, as she came to the last hours of her life, really, she had lost consciousness, and then she came round from being unconscious, and I was the only one with her. And she said refuge 3 times. I go for refuge to all the Buddhas. Now, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. She said that 3 times. And then a few hours later, she passed away. It really felt like she was strongly connected. Something was supporting her. Something was coming through her. And she was able to open and remember her refuge, I think because she'd dropped so much of what was in the way again. That what we started with, that sense of, it's all there. Our connection is all there. It's just a matter of dissolving the disconnection, really, to let the connection really be there. So that's enough from me. Are there any further questions? We've had a little bit of dialogue, but does anyone else want to ask anything?
How do you say the tucheche again?
Tucheche.
Tucheche.
Tucheche. Tuche. Tucheche.
And tucheche to you. It's rather a lovely, isn't it? Tucheche. It's rather. And what does that mean? It's
Compassion. So tuk is the honorific form for heart or compassion. Right. Same thing, really. Tuk. Tukche, a noble heart. It means noble heart, really. They use it to mean compassion. the noble-hearted compassion. Mio.
I wondered if you could say anything about equanimity as enriching, because I think, you know, my kind of first sort of connections with the meaning of equanimity tends to kind of like be like sameness, do you know? Kind of
Yeah.
blandly, everything's
Yeah.
the same, and like, you know, like so. But it's not, is it? I wondered if you could say something about.
Yes, so I had exactly the same response to equanimity. You kind of reduce everything to the same, then you can. Yeah, but no, you're right. That feels a bit fishy, doesn't it? If that was the fruit of the path, that would be a bit. I'm not sure about that. So yes, I would suggest it might be this sense of really meeting. This, I keep doing this. It's a kind of a meeting of our experience very fully. And so you could describe that, Lama Shenpen describes it as awareness being like a mirror that reflects completely whatever comes to it. So every being, all the nuances, the subtlety, the distinctiveness, the specialness of every being would be reflected completely in that mirror. They would be completely met. So I guess the way I reflect on it is, you know, we all walk around as kind of like walking kind of buttons, really, that might get pressed at any moment. Like a whole set of buttons. Oh, that's one. Oh, and I guess equanimity would be completely free of buttons, so you're buttonless, and you're just there with that being, really experiencing that being fully, completely, totally, wholeheartedly. Nothing in the way.
And all beings, I guess.
All beings, yeah.
So is that, you know, when the Buddha's enlightenment, I can't remember exactly, but there's something to talk about, you know, that the Buddha could see all, you know, all beings sort of previous lives and future lives, he could see all of it. Do you think that's the kind of sense of that's fully experiencing all beings? Kind of.
Yeah, maybe. I also was thinking on the eve of his enlightenment, he expressed equanimity in the way he related to Mara. You know, so meeting Mara's arrows completely without being unruffled by attachment or aversion. So Mara tried to seduce him, tried to shoot him, and he was just there. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. But yes, I think probably what you're saying also, yeah.
I think that's a very good way of describing something, to be buttonless. No, it is. It really sort of brings it to life, doesn't it? All these buttons that get pressed and we react like this and we get cross, we get irritated, or we might be nice, or we might be fearful. Yes, to be a bit more buttonless. That's something to
Yeah, thank you.
As usual, I can't quite form my thoughts into a question, but a little bit of what Mia was just saying as well, like, is where fear, so love, happiness, you asked us what does love mean, what are the causes of happiness, and then to me I've been playing this idea of fear, or is love about feeling safe as well, because that's something about feeling safe, or having a place to feel safe, which we often think of as a home or a place to rest. So I can't quite sort what my question is, but it was, I suppose, where is fearlessness in there, or is that a model?
No, it's absolutely in there. In fact, Trungpa Rinpoche described love as fundamental fearlessness, if I'm right. Yeah, fundamental fearlessness, the warrior. Love is really letting go of fear. It's kind of, as I said earlier, I think the Buddha taught it as an antidote to fear originally. Yeah.
You just remind me of the Trumper quote, which the real fearlessness is the product of tenderness. That's like, he said it a couple of times.
Real fearlessness is the product of tenderness. Yeah. He talked about the soft spot, didn't he? But you're talking about safety as well when you mentioned safety, and I really relate to that. In fact, when I was practicing the Apramanas recently and got to that point of imagining, playing with the possibility of all beings loving all beings equally, I noticed I felt safe. And I think I often walk around the world not feeling so safe. And it really helped me to relax. So that sense of being in a loving space, it's really helpful. Yeah.
I think for me, when if I'm struggling for whatever reason, and I manage to connect to that kind of sense of spaciousness, that feels safe for me when I'm meditating. It's really, really special. But I wonder how I can kind of pass that to my daughters who don't really meditate and who kind of don't want to meditate for now. It's not their time at the moment. Because there is a real difference between words and really the practice, isn't it? Where one sits and knows what it feels like to be in refuge, if you know what I mean, to be in that place, resting there.
So are you asking how you might cultivate refuge for someone who's not
ignorant? Teenagers. Let's make it easy. Teenagers.
Yeah, phone. Well, I was teaching a teenager not long ago, and I did use gentle touch, soft touch as a technique, and she found that quite helpful. So the way we pick up our phone, if we picked it up more gently, if we started treating objects in our world more tenderly, and she found that helpful. Another thing I used for her was the tree practice, where you really ground, just basic grounding, imagining you're being a tree. And I do think there is a place for some kind of sense of secular refuge in groundedness in body, which gives us a way of coming down from all that judgmental stuff in our head. If we can feel more connected to our feet, the ground. But maybe some of this just using, I don't know, maybe it's a leap, but maybe some kind of wishing others well could help. As Jenny originally said, when we start wishing others well, it's automatically we're automatically kindling something in our own heart. So I had a friend who used to use waiting at the bus stop as her practice time, that anyone who passed her, any car, anyone else on the road, may you be well, may you be well, may you be well, may you be well, and she ended up getting to work feeling really happy. We can do a simple kind of Tonglen all the time, actually. Anything that we're experiencing, that we're enjoying, that we're appreciating, cup of tea, whatever, a walk, we can have a sense of offering it to others. May others experience this too. And anything that we're finding difficult, that sense of connecting to others who are also finding it difficult, that can be very helpful, can't it? Wishing others well.
Those kind of very short moments.
Momentary, on the spot. on the spot practice.
I think it's helpful too to actually focus on the region of the heart, because when you focus on it, the sensation comes there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
rather than just having these as ideas,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very easy to say, oh, I wish you well,
Mm.
but to feel it also.
Mm. Mm.
Feel it
Yeah.
on the heart brings the feeling in.
Yeah. I agree that that can be helpful, getting into the feeling, the sense, the kinesthetics of it, rather than just the wish. Although just repeating the wish over and over, many people find helpful. But this is where that exercise in discovering the heart of Buddhism, called expanding the chitta, comes in. So linking into whatever it is that has a sense of uplift of the heart, and really feeling the heart. You know, maybe it's just looking at Snowdon, or and really exploring that feeling in the body.
It's quite interesting actually to keep on paying attention to one's heart, because there are a lot of things that affect it, and there are things that close it down, and there are things that open it out. And as part of one's awareness practice, seeing how, well, listening to politicians speak, sometimes you can have a sense for whether they're speaking the truth or not, because one's heart closes, perhaps. Or I'm just using that as an example. Or, well,
Yeah.
and then noticing how when someone else does something really good, that one can, if one pays attention to one's heart can open in response to them.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah.
I noticed also many years ago that lying or trying to protect myself through not being quite truthful caused a sensation in the heart. Caused a bend in the heart. And blaming is terrible. Just notice what goes on in your heart. If you feel like blaming someone, just watch what the heart does.
Can be a trigger of awareness, and we could even notice the pain of when we're blaming either ourselves or others, and do what I suggested at the very beginning, which is, oh, how painful it is, how many others are also doing this judging and blaming, and switch, may all beings be free from judging and blaming themselves and others. Gosh, what kind of a world would we live in if we could forgive each other?
Do that just watching the news.
That's advanced practice, I think.
I could try it.
Let's start with it.
Yeah.
Just on that feeling though, Jenny's mentioned, a simple example that I always remember is when you give a present, you feel so much better than when you receive one. When someone gives something to you, you sort of, a bit embarrassed or whatever, but when you give and you see that person's happy, there's no better feeling, and it's all in the heart. You know, it's not a sort of, it's an inner experience, isn't it? And it's such a simple thing, but you feel it right there.
Generosity, isn't it? It's such a nice feeling. It's like I feel immediately in love when I'm giving. It's really strange. Not that giving what I can't give, but when I'm like giving, and it's really nice.
It's almost like when we start touching into generosity and giving, or giving love, giving good wishes, giving something material. We're connecting to sometimes I sense it like a well that doesn't run dry, that you can continue to give. This is where the richness that you mentioned comes in. I didn't manage to touch on that, but that's the joy aspect. That, yeah, the richness, the ratna, it's the more we give, the more we love, the more we're connected to totality, to reality, to bodhicitta, which is endless love that never runs dry.
And I think when I was talking about the love and kindness, there is an aspect, it's a real balance, isn't it, between giving and wishing others well, and then you receive that kind of feelings, and you know, that kind of line where you woo woo and you stop wishing and you're just there appreciating rather than wish. Do you know what I mean?
Appreciating the quality, the feeling that you don't need to carry on.
But then
building it up. You mean? Yeah, because that's actually in the Apramanas. That's what they say. You know, you were talking about effort, so you put it. It's almost like developing a bit of a muscle. You put some effort in to develop this sense of wishing others well, including those that we find hard to wish well. And then you let go. You just let the whole show go, like taking the plug out the bath, just go. And you rest in that formless quality where you trust, actually, that you don't need to do anything. It's always already there. You just rest in the awakened state, rest in your heart, rest in meditation. So at the end of each of the practices, you just stop all the effort and just... And the same with Tonglen, you know, you're putting in quite a lot of effort, it's quite a lot of form, quite a lot of breathing it in, sending it out, breathing it in, and then you just stop and just trust. I love that bit at the end when you stop and trust that each time you're breathing, you're holding others in your heart. You don't need to do anything, it's just how it is. We're all connected in our heart. You don't need to do anything. So the effort is just making it more obvious what is already always there.
Is that like a kind of mark where how do we know where to stop? Breathing in, giving it, all that movement, all that building up, and just resting.
Yeah, that's a really big question, Dolga. Well, it's the same with all practice, I think. And Lama talks about finding the right touch, or just playing. You know, we'll find it in ourselves. So we play with doing it and then stopping and then just seeing what happens, and
it changes also.
Yeah,
in our practice.
Exploring the practice for yourself. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. I'm sorry, I know I asked a question already, but that's just something that struck me. Kind of, you know, your life circumstances means that you might naturally practice one of these much more strongly than another one. And I'm wondering whether, you know, should you be aiming to kind of have them all balanced equally, or if the circumstances arise for, say, love or, you know, compassion, you know, if the circumstances arise for that practice to you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because I meant to say that at the very beginning, that what Lama Shempen said to me about these practices in the Sangha is that it's really helpful to have a chat with your mentor about what would be the best thing for you to be doing at any particular time, because we don't need to, I mean, some people will access love and compassion simply through formless practice and discovering the heart of Buddhism, and other people will be really drawn to these practices and may just find, you know, in conversation with their mentor, might find one that unblocks all kinds of stuff that they didn't realize they had. So it's not a matter of all of us needing to do all of the practices. It's a matter of, finding your way, and it may be just not now, but later, and something to come back to. Lama Shempen hasn't actually explicitly taught on these practices for quite some time. So we do have recorded teachings on Tonglen, on Lojong, and on the Apramanas. And we also have a package of edited talks and further transcripts, and a kind of week by week taking you through, which Yonten, me and Cindy put together many years ago on the Apramanas, and that's available if anyone wanted to go through it a bit more methodically, with a bit of support from, you know, oh, this week think of this and do this. And I would be happy to facilitate some kind of course if there was interest at some point, maybe, I don't know, maybe next year or something. And then Lama would be up for us inviting her to teach. Maybe if some of us wanted to do, say, study the Apramanas more, and then we could invite Lama to give a weekend on it or something like that. So I'm glad you reminded me I was going to say that. So thank you all. I think we're getting for tea time. Thank you all very much. And
Thank you.
we dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Changju Semni Rinpoche Ma Che Panam Je Jik Je Pa Nyamba Me Pa Tang Gong Ne Gong Ju Pao Wa Sho Changju Semni Rinpoche Ma Che Panam Je Jik Je Pa Nyamba Me Pa Tang Gong Ne Gong Ju Pao Wa Sho Changju Semni Rinpoche Ma Che Panam Je Jik Je Pa Nyamba Me Pa Tang Gong Ne Gong Du Pao Wa Sho.